A mysterious glowing meteorite buried in a cornfield unleashes strange phenomena across a farmer's land. As he investigates the otherworldly rock, unexplainable events begin occurring around his property. What he ultimately discovers inside the meteorite leaves him speechless and changes his life forever. Farmer Michael Hayes had seen many unusual things during his 30 years of working the land in rural Montana, but nothing could have prepared him for what he found that crisp October morning. The events began when his trusty cattle dog Buck started barking frantically near the eastern edge of his cornfield, refusing to leave a particular spot. What Michael unearthed there would not only challenge everything he believed about science, but would also transform his struggling farm into something extraordinary. He first noticed the strange greenish glow seeping through the soil while harvesting his final corn crop of the season. The light seemed to pulse gently like a heartbeat, and the surrounding stalks had grown unusually tall and thick. As Michael dug deeper, his hands trembling with both excitement and fear, he uncovered what appeared to be a meteorite, unlike anything he'd ever seen. The rock was warm to the touch and seemed to respond to his presence, its glow intensifying. Whenever he moved closer, the peculiar object was roughly the size of a basketball, with a surface that appeared almost metallic, yet somehow organic. Its dark, crystalline exterior was crisscrossed with intricate patterns that reminded Michael of circuit boards, but these lines pulsed with that same ethereal green light. The surrounding soil was unusually warm, despite the chilly autumn air, and Michael noticed that his phone had stopped working the moment he approached the site. For several minutes, Michael stood frozen in place, his mind racing with possibilities. His first instinct was to call the authorities or perhaps contact the university in the nearby town of Millbrook. But something held him back. In recent years, his family farm had been struggling to stay afloat. The severe drought conditions had devastated his crops, and the mounting debt had forced him to lay off his last 2 farmhands. The thought of surrendering this discovery to others before understanding its true nature made him hesitate. The Hayes family farm had been passed down through 4 generations, starting with his great-grandfather, who had settled in Montana during the early 1900s. Michael had inherited the property from his father 15 years ago, promising to keep the legacy alive. But modern farming had become increasingly challenging, with large agricultural corporations squeezing out smaller family operations like his. The bank had already sent him 2 foreclosure warnings, and he had less than 6 months to turn things around. As these thoughts weighed heavily on his mind, Michael noticed something even more extraordinary. The cornstalks surrounding the meteorite were not just taller, they were healthier than any he'd seen in years. Their leaves were a deep, vibrant green, despite the late season, and the ears of corn were nearly twice their normal size. It was as if the mysterious object was somehow affecting the growth of nearby plants. Buck's continued barking snapped Michael out of his thoughts. The dog was now circling the meteorite cautiously, his behavior a mixture of aggression and fascination. Michael had never seen his loyal companion act this way before. The animal would approach the glowing rock, hackles raised, only to back away whimpering before repeating the cycle again. "Easy, boy," Michael whispered, placing a reassuring hand on Buck's head. The dog calmed slightly, but kept his eyes fixed on the meteorite. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the cornfield, and Michael knew he needed to make a decision. He couldn't leave the object here, exposed to the elements and visible to passing vehicles on the distant county road. After a moment's hesitation, Michael removed his thick work jacket and carefully wrapped it around the meteorite. The material seemed to dampen its glow somewhat, though he could still feel its warmth through the fabric. As he lifted it, he was surprised by its weight. It was much lighter than it appeared, almost as if it were hollow inside. Making his way back to his truck, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change dramatically. The object in his arms seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, creating an almost synchronous connection that both thrilled and terrified him. Buck followed closely behind, occasionally letting out low growls. Michael placed the wrapped meteorite in the passenger seat of his old pickup truck, noticing that his phone suddenly sprang back to life as he moved away from the discovery site. He quickly snapped several photos of the area where he'd found it, marking the spot with a piece of red surveyor's tape he kept in his truck's glove compartment. As he drove back to the farmhouse, his mind raced with questions. What exactly had he found? Where had it come from? And most importantly, what should he do with it? The logical part of his brain told him to report the discovery to authorities, but another part, the part that had watched his family's legacy crumble over the past few years, urged him to keep it secret, at least for now. The meteorite's green glow had begun to shift and change colors subtly, creating patterns that danced across the truck's dashboard as he drove. Michael couldn't help but think about those extraordinarily healthy cornstalks near the impact site. If this object was somehow affecting plant growth, could it be the miracle his failing farm needed? Pulling up to his weathered farmhouse, Michael made a decision. He would keep the meteorite's existence to himself, at least for a few days, while he observed its effects and documented everything carefully. If anything dangerous or threatening occurred, he would immediately contact the proper authorities. But for now, this discovery was his secret to keep. Little did Michael know that this decision would set in motion a chain of events that would not only transform his struggling farm, but would challenge everything he thought he knew about life itself. The mysterious meteorite in his possession was about to reveal secrets that would extend far beyond the boundaries of his Montana farm, secrets that would make him question the very nature of our place in the universe. Michael Hayes's family farm had once been the pride of Millbrook County, Montana. In its heyday, just a decade ago, the sprawling 500-acre property had produced some of the finest wheat and corn in the state. Local farmers would often stop by to admire his father's innovative irrigation systems and sustainable farming practices. But those golden days were now nothing more than bittersweet memories that haunted Michael as he carried the mysterious meteorite into his barn. The large structure, with its fading red paint and weather-worn walls, stood as a testament to both the farm's former glory and its current struggles. Michael had converted one corner into a makeshift workshop where he repaired equipment he could no longer afford to replace. It was here, among the tools and spare parts, that he decided to set up his impromptu research station. As he carefully unwrapped the meteorite, placing it on his workbench, memories of easier times flooded his mind. He remembered helping his father repair tractors in this very spot, learning lessons about perseverance and hard work that had carried him through tough times. His father's words echoed in his thoughts. "Son, sometimes the land tests us, but it never abandons those who stay faithful to it." The past 5 years had tested that faith severely. First came the devastating drought that had forced many neighboring farms into bankruptcy. Then the agricultural conglomerate Midwest Farming Solutions had moved into the area, driving down crop prices with their industrial-scale operations. The final blow had been the unexpected illness that had claimed his wife Sarah 3 years ago, leaving him alone to manage both the farm and their mounting medical debts. Michael pulled out his father's old leather-bound journal, its pages filled with careful observations about weather patterns, soil conditions, and crop yields. He would document everything about this strange discovery with the same methodical attention to detail. As he began writing, the meteorite's glow seemed to respond to the scratching of his pen, pulsing more intensely with each word he wrote. The evening light filtering through the barn's dusty windows cast long shadows across the workbench, but the meteorite's ethereal glow provided more than enough illumination. Michael noted how its surface patterns had begun to shift and change, like liquid metal flowing beneath a transparent shell. The temperature around the object remained consistently warm, creating a small pocket of heat in the otherwise chilly. Barn Buck had followed him inside and now lay in the corner, his eyes never leaving the mysterious rock. The dog's unusual behavior continued, a mix of wariness and fascination that mirrored Michael's own feelings. Occasionally, Buck would lift his head and tilt it sideways, as if listening to something beyond human hearing. As Michael documented his observations, he couldn't help but think about the bank statement that had arrived that morning. The numbers were grim. Without a miracle, he had less than 6 months before foreclosure became inevitable. The thought of losing the farm that had been in his family for 4 generations made his stomach churn. This land wasn't just property, it was his heritage, his home, and the final connection to his late wife. Sarah had loved this farm as much as he did. She'd been the one to start the small organic vegetable garden that still flourished near the house, though he could never match her green thumb. The memory of her excited voice calling him over to see a newly sprouted seedling made his throat tighten. What would she make of this strange discovery? A sudden movement caught his eye. The meteorite's glow had intensified, and its surface patterns were shifting more rapidly. Michael leaned closer, his scientific curiosity overriding his caution. The intricate lines that covered the object's surface reminded him of the circuit boards in the modern farming equipment he could no longer afford. But these patterns seemed to move and flow like living things. As he watched, fascinated, he noticed something else. The few potted plants he kept in the workshop, mostly Sarah's old herbs that he'd managed to keep alive, seemed to be responding to the meteorite's presence. Their leaves were turning slightly toward the object, like flowers following the sun. One withered basil plant, which he'd been meaning to dispose of, appeared to be straightening up, its leaves gradually regaining their color. Michael quickly grabbed his phone and started recording video, making sure to capture both the meteorite's shifting patterns and the plant's unusual behavior. If this object truly had some effect on plant growth, as the corn stalks near the discovery site suggested, could it somehow help save his farm? The rational part of his mind warned him against getting his hopes up. The world was full of snake, oil salesmen promising miracle solutions to struggling farmers, but this was different. He had physical evidence right in front of him. The real question was, what should he do with it? As darkness fell outside, Michael realized he'd spent hours documenting the meteorite's properties. His stomach growled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten since lunch. But before he could head to the house for dinner, he needed to secure his discovery. After some consideration, he cleared out an old gun safe in the corner of the workshop. The heavy steel box seemed like the perfect place to store the meteorite overnight. As he carefully placed the object inside, he noticed that its glow dimmed slightly, as if responding to the confinement. Buck whined softly from his corner, and Michael couldn't shake the feeling that he was locking away something that defied ordinary explanation. But he needed time to understand what he'd found before deciding his next move. Looking back at his newly written notes, Michael felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Tomorrow, he would begin proper experiments to test the meteorite's effects on plants. If his observations proved correct, this mysterious object might be exactly what he needed to save his family's legacy. But as he closed the workshop door, behind him, Buck trailing at his heels, a nagging thought tugged at his conscience. What if he was dealing with something far beyond his understanding? The next morning arrived with a brilliant Montana sunrise, painting the sky in streaks of pink and gold. Michael had barely slept, his mind racing with possibilities about the mysterious object locked away in his barn. He'd spent most of the night researching meteorites on his old laptop, but nothing he found matched the peculiar characteristics of his discovery. As he approached the barn, steaming coffee mug in hand, he noticed something that made him stop. In his tracks, a thin tendril of green light was seeping through the gaps in the barn's wooden walls, pulsing like a beacon in the early morning dimness. Buck, who had been trotting alongside him, suddenly froze and let out a low growl. Michael's hands trembled slightly as he unlocked the barn door. The sight that greeted him inside made him drop his coffee mug, the ceramic shattering on the concrete floor. The gun safe where he'd stored the meteorite was emanating an intense green glow from every seam and joint. More remarkably, all the plants in the workshop had undergone a dramatic transformation overnight. The withered basil plant he'd noticed yesterday had not only recovered, but had grown to 3 times its normal size, its leaves a deep, vibrant green that seemed almost unnatural. Sarah's old herbs had exploded with new growth, their stems and leaves reaching toward the gun safe like desperate hands. Even more astonishing were the small saplings sprouting from the dirt floor around the safe, plants Michael didn't recognize, with iridescent leaves that seemed to shimmer in the meteorites. Glow, heart pounding, Michael approached the safe and carefully entered the combination. As the door swung open, he had to shield his eyes from the intensity of the light within. The meteorite was hovering several inches above the safe's bottom shelf, rotating slowly in mid-air. Its surface patterns had become more pronounced, the circuit-like lines now deeply etched and pulsing with energy. "Dear God," Michael whispered, reaching out tentatively toward the floating object. The moment his fingers made contact, a surge of energy coursed through his body. It wasn't painful, but rather felt like a gentle electric current, carrying with it a strange sensation of consciousness. For a brief moment, Michael could have sworn he felt something responding to his touch, as if the meteorite was somehow aware of his presence. Buck's barking snapped him back to reality. The dog was now frantically circling the workshop, alternating between excited yips and concerned whines. Michael noticed that the strange saplings growing around the safe had already reached knee-height, their otherworldly leaves creating dancing patterns of light and shadow on the barn walls. With trembling hands, Michael retrieved his father's journal and began documenting everything he observed. The meteorite's temperature had increased significantly, and his phone's compass was spinning wildly when brought near it. Most intriguingly, he noticed that the object's glow intensified whenever he approached it, as if responding specifically to his presence. As the morning wore on, Michael conducted a series of impromptu experiments. He brought in several dying plants from around the farm, placing them at varying distances from the meteorite. The results were astonishing. Within hours, even the most withered specimens showed signs of revival, their colors deepening and new growth appearing before his eyes. But it wasn't until mid-afternoon that Michael made the most startling discovery. While examining one of the mysterious new saplings, he noticed something extraordinary about its fruit, small, translucent pods that seemed to contain their own source of light. As he studied them closer, he realized with a shock that these weren't any earthly plants he'd ever encountered. The structure of their leaves, the composition of their stems, even the way they moved in response to light, everything about them seemed alien. The implications of this realization hit him like a physical blow. He wasn't just dealing with an unusual meteorite. He was potentially handling extraterrestrial life forms. The thought both terrified and excited him. If these plants could grow so quickly and vigorously in Earth's soil, what might they do for his struggling farm? As Michael pondered this question, he heard the distant sound of vehicles approaching. Looking out the barn window, his heart nearly stopped. 3 black SUVs were making their way up his long driveway, kicking up clouds of dust in their wake. Through his binoculars, he could make out government plates on the vehicles. In that moment, Michael had to make a crucial decision. His scientific curiosity urged him to share his discovery with the authorities. This could be one of the most important scientific finds in human history. But another part of him, the part that had watched his family's legacy crumble over the years, feared what might happen if he did. Would they confiscate everything? Would he lose control of his land? Would his discovery end up in some secret government facility, never to be seen again? With only minutes to act, Michael quickly but carefully wrapped the meteorite in his old work jacket. The strange saplings would be impossible to hide, but their true nature might not be immediately apparent to casual observers. He secured the object in a hidden compartment beneath his workshop floorboards, a space his grandfather had built during Prohibition to hide his moonshine still. Just as he finished replacing the last floorboard, he heard tires on gravel outside the barn. Buck had positioned himself between Michael and the door, hackles raised. Taking a deep breath, Michael straightened up and tried to compose himself. Whatever happened next would determine not just the fate of his discovery, but potentially the future of his family's farm. As footsteps approached the barn door, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that he was now involved in something far larger than himself. The meteorite's glow, though hidden, seemed to pulse in rhythm with his racing heart, as if acknowledging the weight of his decision. There was no turning back now. The meeting with the government officials had gone better than Michael could have hoped. They were investigating reports of an unusual meteor shower from the previous night, but after a cursory inspection of his property and some routine questions, they seemed satisfied. Michael had managed to keep his composure, attributing the strange glow in his barn to some new LED grow lights he'd been experimenting with for indoor winter crops. Once the black SUVs disappeared down his driveway, Michael waited a full hour before retrieving the meteorite from its hiding place. As he lifted the floorboards, the familiar green glow welcomed him like an old friend. The alien object seemed to pulse more intensely than before, almost as if it had sensed his protection of it. The strange saplings had continued their extraordinary growth during the officials' visit, but thankfully none of the agents had seemed to notice anything unusual about them. Now standing nearly shoulder height, the plants had developed more of the translucent, light-emitting pods. Michael carefully harvested one of the pods, noting its unexpected weight and the way it seemed to thrum with energy in his palm. That evening, Michael made a decision that would change everything. In the far corner of his property, hidden from the road by a grove of old cottonwoods, lay a neglected greenhouse. Sarah had used it for starting seedlings in the spring, but since her passing, it had fallen into disuse. If he could successfully cultivate these alien plants there, protected from prying eyes. Working through the night, Michael cleaned out the greenhouse and repaired its broken panels. He carefully transferred several of the alien saplings from the barn, planting them in rich soil he'd prepared with compost and nutrients. The meteorite, still wrapped in his jacket, he placed at the center of the greenhouse, elevating it on an old metal stand. The effect was immediate and stunning. In the enclosed space, the meteorite's glow seemed to intensify tenfold, bathing the greenhouse in ethereal green light. The transplanted saplings responded instantly, their leaves turning toward the object like sunflowers tracking the sun. Even in the darkness, Michael could see new growth beginning, branches extending and fresh pods forming before his eyes. But it was what happened next that truly amazed him. The ordinary seedlings Sarah had left behind in the greenhouse, forgotten. Tomatoes, peppers, and herbs began to transform. Their growth patterns changed, becoming more vigorous, more resilient. Under the meteorite's influence, they took on subtle characteristics of their alien neighbors, a slight iridescence to their leaves, an unusual vitality in their stems. Michael worked frantically to document everything in his father's journal. He took soil samples, measured growth rates, and photographed the plant's development. The alien pods seemed to be producing some kind of nutrient-rich substance that enriched the soil around them. When he tested this soil on a small patch of his failing cornfield, the results were beyond his wildest dreams. Within days, that test patch had grown to twice the height of the surrounding corn, its stalks thick and healthy, its ears developing at an unprecedented rate. The crop seemed impervious to the drought conditions that had plagued his farm, thriving despite the lack of rain. Even more remarkably, the enhanced corn showed no signs of the usual pests and diseases that had devastated his previous harvests. Hope began to take root in Michael's heart, growing as steadily as the plants under his care. If he could replicate these results across his entire farm, he might not only save his family's legacy, but revolutionize agriculture itself. The possibilities seemed endless: drought-resistant crops, accelerated growth cycles, natural soil enrichment. Late one night, as Michael sat in the greenhouse recording his observations, he noticed something extraordinary. The alien plants seemed to be communicating with each other through subtle pulses of light, creating complex patterns that danced between their luminescent pods. The meteorite responded to these light signals, its own patterns shifting and changing in what appeared to be a synchronized dialogue. Watching this ethereal display, Michael felt a profound sense of responsibility. He wasn't just preserving his farm anymore. He was serving as a caretaker for something truly extraordinary. These alien life forms had chosen his land, perhaps not by accident, and were now sharing their secrets with him. Buck had taken to sleeping in the greenhouse, his initial wariness of the meteorite replaced by what seemed like protective instinct. The dog would spend hours watching the interplay of lights, his head tilted thoughtfully, occasionally responding to sounds or movements that Michael couldn't perceive. As the days passed, Michael developed a routine. He would spend his mornings tending to his regular farm duties, maintaining appearances for any passing neighbors. His afternoons and evenings were devoted to the greenhouse, meticulously documenting the alien plants' development and experimenting with their effects on traditional crops. The transformation of his test patch hadn't gone unnoticed. Old Jim Parker, whose farm bordered Michael's to the east, had commented on the unusual vigor of that section of corn. Michael had dismissed it as a new fertilizer blend he was trying out, but he knew he couldn't keep his secret contained forever. Success on this scale would inevitably draw attention. But for now, watching the supernatural light show in his greenhouse and feeling the gentle warmth of the meteorite, Michael allowed himself to dream. He imagined his entire farm restored to its former glory and beyond. He pictured himself continuing Sarah's legacy of innovation and sustainable farming, though in ways she could never have imagined. For the first time in years, the future held more promise than fear. Little did Michael know that his small greenhouse experiment was about to attract attention from forces far beyond the local farming community. The true test of his resolve and the real nature of his extraordinary discovery was yet to reveal itself. 3 weeks after Michael's discovery, the changes on his farm had become impossible to ignore. His test patch of corn had produced a record-breaking harvest, with ears nearly twice their normal size and kernels that seemed to shimmer with an unusual vitality. But with success came complications he hadn't anticipated. It started with the strange weather patterns. The area directly above his greenhouse had developed a permanent, swirling cloud formation that glowed faintly at night. Local weather stations were baffled by the phenomenon, and several meteorologists from the state university had already called requesting permission to study the anomaly. Michael had politely declined, claiming he was too busy with the harvest to accommodate visitors. But the weather was just the beginning. One morning, as Michael approached the greenhouse for his daily observations, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The alien plants had broken through the glass panels of the roof, their iridescent branches reaching toward the sky like luminous fingers. They had grown over 20 feet tall overnight, their light-emitting pods now the size of basketballs and pulsing with an intensity that was visible even in broad daylight. More alarming still was the effect these changes were having on the surrounding wildlife. Flocks of birds had begun circling the greenhouse constantly, their behavior erratic and unusual. Deer and elk that normally avoided the farm were now gathering at its edges, standing motionless for hours as if in a trance. Even the insects seemed different, butterflies with slightly luminescent wings, bees that appeared to glow as they pollinated his enhanced crops. Buck's behavior had also changed dramatically. The once energetic dog now spent most of his time in an almost meditative state near the meteorite, barely responding to Michael's calls. When he did move, his movements were unnaturally coordinated, and at night his eyes had started to emit the same faint green glow as the alien plants. Michael's concern deepened when he discovered that the enhanced soil from his test patch had begun spreading underground, creating a network of luminescent roots that extended far beyond the original planting area. His entire cornfield was now showing signs of transformation, the crops growing at an alarming rate and developing characteristics that were decidedly not of this world. Late one evening, as Michael was documenting these changes in his father's journal, he heard an unusual sound coming from the greenhouse. It was a low, rhythmic humming that seemed to resonate with the meteorite's pulsing light. When he investigated, he found the alien plants swaying in perfect synchronization, their pods emitting complex patterns of light that made his head spin when he looked at them too long. But what truly terrified him was what he saw in the center of the greenhouse. The meteorite had begun to crack open, revealing a crystalline interior that pulsed with an intense energy. As he watched, frozen in place, tendrils of light emerged from the fissures, reaching out like searching fingers. When one of these tendrils touched a nearby plant, the entire organism transformed instantly, its cellular structure becoming visible through suddenly transparent skin. Michael's scientific curiosity warred with his growing fear. The changes were accelerating beyond his control, and he had no way to predict what might happen next. His phone had stopped working entirely within a 100-yard radius of the greenhouse, and his computer would crash every time he tried to document the increasingly bizarre phenomena. The situation reached a critical point when he discovered the first animal transformation. A group of field mice had somehow gotten into the greenhouse, and what he found there shook him to his core. The creatures had developed partially translucent skin, their internal organs now visible and seemingly altered. More disturbing still, they appeared to be communicating with the alien plants through pulses of bioluminescence. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. The gentle green glow that had once seemed so promising now filled him with dread. From his bedroom window, he could see the greenhouse pulsing like a beacon, its light seeming to reach up into the swirling clouds above. The sound of sirens in the distance suggested he wasn't the only one noticing the strange phenomena. As he lay in bed, trying to decide what to do, Michael felt a sudden, sharp pain in his right hand, the same hand he'd been using to tend the alien plants. Holding it up to the light, he noticed with horror that his veins were beginning to glow with the same ethereal green light as the meteorite. The transformation he'd observed in his crops and the local wildlife was now beginning to affect him. Morning brought new challenges. Local news vans had begun gathering at the end of his driveway, drawn by reports of the strange lights and weather patterns. Amateur astronomers had set up telescopes in neighboring fields, their cameras pointed at the swirling cloud formation above his farm. Social media was buzzing with theories about everything from government experiments to alien invasion. Michael knew he needed to act fast. The situation was spiraling out of control, and he felt responsible for whatever might happen next. But as he approached the greenhouse to attempt to contain the spread, he realized the magnitude of what he was dealing with. The alien plants had developed a kind of defensive perimeter, their branches intertwining to create an impenetrable barrier. Even Buck couldn't get close anymore, though the dog seemed more interested in maintaining the perimeter than breaking through it. Looking at his glowing veins and feeling the strange new awareness growing in his mind, Michael understood that he was now part of something far larger than himself. The meteorite wasn't just affecting his farm. It was transforming everything it touched, creating a new ecosystem that defied earthly understanding, and somehow he had become integral to its mysterious purpose. As police cars began making their way up his driveway and military helicopters appeared on the horizon, Michael faced the most important decision of his life. Should he try to stop the transformation, potentially destroying something extraordinary but alien? Or should he protect it, becoming part of whatever change was coming to his small corner of Montana? The meteorite's pulse matched his heartbeat, and the alien plant swayed in rhythm with his breathing. He was connected to it all now, for better or worse, and time was running out to decide what that connection would mean for him, his farm, and possibly the entire world. Just as the situation seemed most desperate, help arrived from an unexpected source. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a prominent botanist from Montana State University, pulled into Michael's driveway moments before the police could cordon off the area. She hadn't come by accident. She'd been monitoring the unusual satellite data centered on his farm for weeks, and her credentials allowed her to bypass the growing crowd of onlookers. Michael's first instinct was to turn her away like all the others, but something in her calm, scientific demeanor made him pause. More importantly, she didn't seem surprised or frightened by his glowing veins when she noticed them. Instead, she simply pulled up her own sleeve, revealing similar luminescent patterns crawling up her arm. "You're not alone, Mr. Hayes," she said quietly, her dark eyes reflecting the ethereal light emanating from both their bodies. "There are others like us, people who've encountered similar objects. We've been watching your farm's transformation with great interest." Over coffee in his kitchen, Elena explained that she was part of a secret scientific consortium that had been studying similar meteorite incidents across the globe. Their research suggested these weren't random events, but part of a coordinated pattern. The organisms and changes they introduced seemed designed to help regenerate damaged ecosystems. "What's happening here isn't an invasion," Elena explained, spreading out satellite photos showing similar patterns of transformation in other remote locations. "It's more like terraforming in reverse. The aliens aren't trying to make Earth like their world, they're trying to enhance our world's natural systems." As they talked, more members of Elena's team arrived. Dr. James Chen, a quantum physicist whose hands sparkled with the same green energy, immediately began setting up monitoring equipment around the property. Dr. Sarah Williams, an environmental microbiologist, started analyzing soil samples from the transformed areas. Their presence helped calm the local authorities, lending scientific legitimacy to the situation. The team worked quickly to establish a research perimeter around Michael's farm. They coordinated with local law enforcement to keep media and curiosity seekers at a safe distance, citing potential biological hazards. Their government contacts helped suppress the more sensational news stories, replacing them with carefully crafted narratives about experimental agricultural research. For the first time since discovering the meteorite, Michael felt like he could breathe easier. These people understood what he was experiencing. They shared his perspective on the importance of protecting and studying these alien life forms, rather than destroying them out of fear. Elena's team helped Michael understand the changes happening to his body. The luminescence in their veins wasn't a sign of infection, but of adaptation. The meteorite and its accompanying life forms were creating a symbiotic relationship with compatible humans, sharing information and abilities through a complex network of bioluminescent signals. "Think of it as an upgrade to our operating system," Dr. Chen explained. showing Michael the data readings from his own transformed cells. These changes are enhancing our natural abilities, not replacing them. You've probably noticed increased intuition about your crops, better understanding of weather patterns, maybe even direct communication with the altered plants. Michael nodded, remembering the strange moments of connection he'd experienced in the greenhouse. He'd attributed them to imagination or stress, but now they made sense. He was becoming part of a larger network, a bridge between Earth's biosphere and the alien enhancement system. Buck, it turned out, had undergone a similar transformation. Elena's veterinary specialist, Dr. Marcus Thompson, examined the dog with fascination. "Animals seem to adapt even more readily than humans," he explained. "Your dog isn't just guarding the greenhouse. He's actively participating in the transformation process, helping to regulate the speed and extent of the changes." As the day progressed, Michael worked with the team to document everything he'd observed since finding the meteorite. His careful notes in his father's journal proved invaluable, helping the scientists understand the progression of changes. Eleanor was particularly interested in his successful integration of alien and Earth crops. "You've done something remarkable here," she told him, examining his enhanced corn. "Most other sites we've studied showed complete transformation, but you've managed to create a hybrid system. The alien organisms are working with native species rather than replacing them. This could be the breakthrough we've been looking for." The team helped Michael understand that the weather pattern above his farm wasn't just a side effect. It was a communication system. The swirling clouds were actually a complex atmospheric processor, helping to clean and optimize the local environment. Similar formations had appeared above other sites worldwide, working together to address climate issues on a global scale. As night fell, Elena gathered everyone in the greenhouse to witness something extraordinary. The cracks in the meteorite had grown larger, revealing more of its crystalline interior. But instead of the chaos Michael had feared, the team helped him see the beautiful precision in its design. The tendrils of light weren't random. They were creating a deliberate pattern, a blueprint for environmental restoration. "What we're seeing here is beyond mere agriculture," Elena explained, her face illuminated by the pulsing lights. "These visitors are showing us how to heal our planet's damaged ecosystems. They're not taking over, they're teaching us, helping us evolve into better caretakers of our world." For the first time since the transformation began, Michael felt truly hopeful. With Elena's team supporting him, he could focus on understanding and directing the changes rather than fighting them. His farm wasn't being destroyed. It was becoming something new, something that could help address the environmental challenges facing their world. As the scientists continued their work, Michael stood in his greenhouse, watching the interplay of lights between the alien plants and his transformed crops. Buck sat beside him, their shared luminescence creating patterns in the air between them. They were no longer alone in this extraordinary journey, and with help, they might just discover its true purpose. The breakthrough came during the pre-dawn hours, exactly 1 month after Michael's initial discovery. He and Elena's team had been working around the clock, studying the accelerating changes on the farm, when the meteorite's crystalline structure finally opened completely, revealing its true purpose. The scene in the greenhouse was breathtaking. As the crystal shell split apart, it released a cascade of luminescent spores that filled the air like a galaxy of tiny green stars. Instead of chaos, however, the spores moved with precise intention, each one seeking out specific plants and organisms within their reach. The alien plants began pulsing in synchronized patterns, creating a mesmerizing light show that seemed to communicate complex information. Dr. Chen's instruments recorded unprecedented levels of energy, but more importantly, they detected something revolutionary. "The spores are carrying genetic information," he announced, staring at his readings in amazement. "They're not just transforming organisms, they're upgrading them with specific traits selected from successful adaptations across the galaxy." The evidence was immediate and undeniable. The enhanced corn in Michael's test field suddenly underwent another transformation. The stalks grew more resilient, developing a crystalline structure within their cellular walls that allowed them to absorb and process sunlight with incredible efficiency. Yet they remained recognizably corn, earth plants enhanced with alien capabilities rather than replaced by them. Michael, whose connection to the alien network had grown stronger, could actually feel the changes happening. Through his enhanced perception, he could sense the spores working to optimize each plant's genetic code, selecting traits that would help them thrive in Earth's challenging conditions while maintaining their essential nature. "It's like they're creating a bridge between worlds," Eleanor observed, her own luminescent patterns glowing brightly with excitement. "These organisms aren't here to colonize, they're here to collaborate, to share what they've learned from other worlds, to help Earth's biosphere adapt and survive." The transformation spread across Michael's entire farm over the next several hours. The regular crops began developing similar crystalline structures, becoming more drought-resistant and productive, while requiring fewer resources. The soil itself came alive with beneficial microorganisms that could rapidly restore depleted nutrients. But the most stunning change occurred in the experimental greenhouse. The alien plants, now fully mature, began producing not just light-emitting pods, but actual fruits. These otherworldly harvests looked similar to Earth fruits, but possessed extraordinary properties. Initial analysis showed they were packed with nutrients in combinations never before seen on Earth, and they seemed capable of adapting their chemical composition to meet the specific nutritional needs of whoever consumed them. "This could revolutionize how we think about food security," Dr. Williams exclaimed, examining the preliminary test results. "These plants aren't just producing food, they're producing optimized nutrition that could help address global malnutrition and health issues." The success was more than scientific. As word of the breakthrough spread through proper channels, legitimate agricultural and environmental organizations began reaching out. Many were skeptical at first, but the results were impossible to ignore. Michael's farm had become a proving ground for a new kind of agriculture, one that could potentially help address many of Earth's environmental challenges. Buck, whose transformation had stabilized, now served as a living example of harmonious adaptation. The dog had developed an almost supernatural ability to detect and respond to environmental imbalances, helping the team understand how the alien enhancement system worked to maintain ecological harmony. For Michael, watching his family farm become the centerpiece of such a momentous discovery was overwhelming. The land that had been struggling to survive was now thriving beyond his wildest dreams, but in a way that could potentially help farms worldwide. His father's old journal was filled with new observations, documenting a revolutionary chapter in agricultural history. As the sun rose over the transformed farm, casting prismatic light through the crystalline structures that now dotted his fields, Michael realized they had achieved something extraordinary. They had proven that coexistence and collaboration with the alien life forms was not only possible, but beneficial. This was more than a personal victory. It was a glimpse of a possible future where humanity could work in harmony with advanced alien life to heal their wounded planet. Elena gathered the team for a morning briefing, their collective bioluminescence creating a warm glow in the farm's old kitchen. "What we've witnessed here is just the beginning," she said, her eyes bright with possibility. "Michael's farm has shown us the way forward. Now we need to understand how to share these benefits responsibly with the rest of the world." The first victory had been achieved, but Michael knew their work was far from over. As he looked out over his transformed land, he could sense more changes coming, bigger challenges and greater opportunities. But now they had proof that their path was the right one, and they had the knowledge and support to face whatever came next. As the team celebrated their initial success, a deeper truth began to emerge from their ongoing research. Dr. Chen's advanced sensors detected a new pattern in the meteorite's crystalline remains, a complex sequence of energy pulses that appeared to be a form of communication. The rhythmic patterns reminded Michael of a heartbeat, though far more intricate and purposeful than anything biological. At first, they thought it might be attempting to contact other meteorites, but the truth was far more extraordinary. One evening, as Michael sat in the greenhouse documenting the latest changes in his father's journal, the remaining crystal fragments began to resonate at a frequency that caused all the transformed plants to glow in perfect synchronization. The air itself seemed to shimmer with ethereal light, creating waves of luminescence that rippled through the space like aurora borealis. The temperature in the greenhouse rose slightly, and the familiar scent of earth and vegetation was joined by an otherworldly fragrance that reminded Michael of ozone after a lightning strike. Suddenly, both Michael and Buck experienced something unprecedented. The luminescent patterns flowing through their veins aligned with the pulsing light, creating intricate geometric designs that danced across their skin. It wasn't painful. Rather, it felt like being immersed in warm, energized water. In that moment, they received what could only be described as a direct message from the meteorite's creators. It wasn't communication through words, but rather through a flood of images, emotions, and understanding that filled their minds with crystal clarity. "They're showing us their world," Michael gasped, as Elena and her team rushed to document the phenomenon. His voice trembled with awe as the visions filled his consciousness. Not just one world, hundreds of them. Planets with purple skies and floating forests, worlds where crystalline life forms create vast networks of living cities, oceans that think and communicate with their inhabitants. This isn't a random occurrence. Earth is part of a vast network of planets being helped to evolve and adapt. Dr. Chen's instruments were recording unprecedented energy signatures. "These readings are off the scale," he announced, his fingers flying over his keyboard. "The crystalline structure is generating quantum-level coherence patterns that match theories about consciousness transfer across space-time. We're not just receiving data, we're experiencing direct cognitive exchange with an alien intelligence." Through this connection, they learned that the meteorite was part of a galaxy-wide initiative by an ancient civilization. These beings had discovered that the key to surviving climate change and environmental challenges wasn't to fight against nature, but to help it evolve and adapt. They had developed the technology to share beneficial traits across different worlds, helping endangered biospheres recover and thrive. The process had been refined over millions of years, with each successful planetary restoration adding to their knowledge and capabilities. "It's like a galactic restoration project," Elena breathed, her own enhanced consciousness allowing her to share in the vision. Her luminescent patterns pulsed in harmony with Michael's as they absorbed the vast scope of information. "They've been doing this for millions of years, helping planets heal themselves. Earth isn't being invaded, we're being included in a network of thriving worlds." Dr. Williams moved through the greenhouse, taking readings from the transformed plants. "The cellular changes we're observing are unprecedented," she reported, her voice filled with excitement. "These organisms are developing quantum-coherent photosynthesis capabilities. They're not just processing light more efficiently, they're actually storing and transmitting information through light itself." The revelation continued as they learned more about the true nature of the transformations. The glowing patterns in their veins weren't just signs of change, they were living connections to a vast database of environmental knowledge. Every transformed plant, animal, and human on Michael's farm had become part of an interconnected system, designed to understand and respond to Earth's ecological needs. The network was self-regulating, capable of adjusting its effects based on local conditions and maintaining balance within existing ecosystems. Buck, who had been sitting alertly by Michael's side, suddenly stood and walked to the center of the greenhouse. The dog's enhanced consciousness seemed to be processing the information in its own unique way. His fur rippled with waves of bioluminescence, and his eyes shone with an intelligence that seemed both canine and otherworldly. Through their shared connection, Michael could sense that Buck was serving as a bridge between Earth's animal consciousness and the alien network, helping to ensure the changes remained compatible with existing life forms. The meteorite fragments provided another stunning truth. They hadn't landed on Michael's farm by accident. Through the visions, they learned that the ancient civilization had been monitoring Earth for centuries, watching as humanity struggled with environmental challenges. They had chosen specific locations around the world to introduce their enhancement system, selecting sites and individuals who would understand and nurture the transformation rather than fear it. The final piece of the revelation came as the sun set, casting the greenhouse in deep shadows that only emphasized the ethereal light show within. The alien consciousness shared glimpses of Earth's potential future, verdant forests reclaiming deserts, oceans teeming with restored coral reefs, cities powered by living energy networks that existed in harmony with nature. It wasn't just a dream, it was achievable reality, provided humanity chose to embrace the opportunity for transformation. "This is beyond anything we could have imagined," Elena said, her voice hushed with wonder. "We're not just witnessing first contact, we're experiencing the beginning of Earth's integration into a galactic ecosystem." As the visions faded and the intense glow subsided to its normal levels, Michael felt a profound sense of purpose settle over him. His family's farm hadn't just been saved, it had become ground zero for a transformation that could save their entire world. The real work was just beginning, and they would need all their enhanced abilities to face the challenges ahead. The morning after their profound revelation, Michael's farm received an unexpected visitor. A sleek, black helicopter descended from the cloud formation above his property, bearing markings that Elena immediately recognized. Dr. Diana Maxwell, the head of the Global Environmental Restoration Initiative, Jerry, stepped out onto the transformed soil of Michael's farm, her eyes widening at the sight before her. Dr. Maxwell wasn't just any scientist. She was one of the world's leading experts in environmental restoration and had been tracking similar phenomena across the globe. Her arrival marked a turning point in their project, elevating it from a local discovery to part of a worldwide initiative. "I've seen 6 other sites like this," she announced after introductions were made. "But none of them have achieved the level of integration you've managed here." Her gaze swept across the crystalline structures that now dotted Michael's fields, taking in the harmonious blend of Earth and alien life forms. "This is exactly what we've been hoping to find." Inside the greenhouse, Dr. Maxwell's scientific curiosity gave way to genuine awe. The alien plants had continued to evolve, developing new structures that seemed to bridge the gap between organic and crystalline life. Tendrils of light connected different species in visible networks, sharing information and resources in real time. "What you've accomplished here is remarkable," she said, watching as Buck demonstrated his ability to interact with the network, his bioluminescent patterns synchronizing with the plants. "Most other sites have experienced more aggressive transformations, but you've managed to create a sustainable hybrid ecosystem that actually enhances native life forms rather than replacing them. Michael explained their journey, from his initial discovery to the recent revelations about the Galactic Restoration Network. Dr. Maxwell listened intently, occasionally nodding as pieces of a larger puzzle seemed to fall into place for her. "We've been tracking these phenomena for years," she revealed, pulling up classified satellite imagery on her tablet. "Unusual weather patterns, accelerated plant growth, unexplained improvements in soil quality. They've been appearing all over the world, but most sites either destabilize or become too alien to study effectively. Your farm is different. You found the balance we've been searching for." The implications of her words began to sink in. Michael's farm wasn't just a successful experiment, it was a prototype for what could be achieved on a global scale. Dr. Maxwell explained that Gary had been preparing for this moment, developing frameworks for implementing large-scale environmental restoration projects that could work in harmony with these alien enhancements. Elena's team shared their latest findings, including the detailed genetic analyses of the hybrid crops and the quantum-level communications they documented. Dr. Maxwell's excitement grew with each revelation. "This is exactly the kind of breakthrough we need," she declared. "The world is reaching a tipping point in terms of environmental degradation. Traditional methods aren't enough anymore. We need this kind of transformative approach." As they walked the perimeter of Michael's property, Dr. Maxwell explained the bigger picture. Gary had been quietly building a network of research stations and restoration sites around the world, preparing for the possibility of beneficial alien contact. They had identified other individuals like Michael, people who had experienced similar transformations and developed enhanced abilities to communicate with alien life forms. "What we're proposing," she said, pausing to examine a cluster of hybrid wheat that sparkled with internal light, "is to establish your farm as a primary research and training center. We want to bring other transformed individuals here, along with leading scientists and environmental experts. Your success in creating stable hybrid ecosystems could be the key to implementing these changes on a global scale." The proposal was both exciting and daunting. Michael's farm would become a focal point for a worldwide transformation, a place where people could learn to work with, rather than against, the alien enhancement system. Dr. Maxwell assured him that he would retain control of his property and continue his agricultural work, but with substantial support and resources from Gary. "We're not just talking about saving individual farms anymore," she explained. "This is about developing new approaches to agriculture, environmental restoration, and possibly even human evolution. Your experience, your connection to the land, and your success in working with these alien life forms make you uniquely qualified to help guide this process." As if to emphasize her words, the weather pattern above the farm shifted, creating a spectacular display of light and color. The alien network seemed to be responding to their discussion, acknowledging the potential for expanded collaboration. Buck, who had been quietly observing their conversation, suddenly perked up and trotted toward the greenhouse. Following him, they found that the remaining meteorite fragments had begun pulsing with renewed energy. The alien consciousness reached out to them all, sharing visions of similar transformations spreading across continents, creating a web of restored ecosystems that could help stabilize Earth's failing environmental systems. Dr. Maxwell watched in amazement as the luminescent patterns in Michael's veins synchronized with the pulsing light. "This is extraordinary," she breathed. "The level of integration you've achieved with the network, it's beyond anything we've seen before. You're not just communicating with it, you're helping to guide its development." The team spent the rest of the day discussing logistics and planning next steps. Dr. Maxwell's resources would help them expand their research facilities while maintaining the delicate balance they'd achieved. More importantly, her involvement meant they would have support in sharing their discoveries with the world in a controlled, responsible way. "We'll need to move carefully," she cautioned. "Too much publicity too soon could lead to panic or attempts to exploit the technology. But we also need to move quickly. Earth's environmental systems are reaching critical thresholds, and we need solutions on a global scale." As the sun set, casting prismatic light through the crystalline structures that had become such a natural part of his farm, Michael felt a deep sense of rightness about this new direction. His family's land wouldn't just be preserved, it would become part of humanity's next great leap forward, a bridge between Earth's past and a transformed future. Dr. Maxwell's helicopter departed as darkness fell, leaving behind a team of Jedi specialists who would help begin the expansion process. Michael stood in his greenhouse, surrounded by the gentle pulsing of alien and hybrid life forms, feeling more connected than ever to both his land and the greater purpose it now served. The farm that had once been on the brink of failure was about to become a beacon of hope for the entire world. As Buck settled beside him, their shared bioluminescence creating patterns of light in the evening air, Michael knew they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. 1 year after Michael's extraordinary discovery, his farm had become unrecognizable, but in the most magnificent way possible. The once struggling property had transformed into a harmonious blend of Earth and alien life, a living testament to what humanity could achieve by working with, rather than against, the universe's offerings. The Gary Research Center, now integrated seamlessly into the landscape, had become a global hub for environmental restoration studies. Scientists, farmers, and transformed individuals from around the world came to learn from Michael's successful integration of alien and terrestrial agriculture. The crystalline structures that dotted his fields no longer seemed alien. They had become symbols of hope, their gentle glow a reminder of the possibilities that lay ahead. On a crisp autumn morning, exactly 1 year after finding the meteorite, Michael stood in his transformed greenhouse with Buck at his side. Dr. Maxwell and Elena's team had gathered to witness something extraordinary. The original meteorite fragments, which had continued to evolve alongside everything else on the farm, were showing signs of a final transformation. "It's like they've completed their mission," Elena observed, watching as the crystals began to pulse with an intensity they hadn't seen since the initial revelation. The light patterns spreading through the greenhouse seemed to tell a story, not just of Michael's farm, but of Earth's potential future. Through their enhanced perception, shared now by dozens of other transformed individuals who had come to study at the farm, they could sense the alien consciousness preparing for a final gift. The meteorite fragments suddenly dissolved into pure light, releasing a cascade of luminescent spores that spread throughout the greenhouse and beyond. But unlike the first transformation, this one was different. The spores didn't change anything. Instead, they seemed to stabilize and strengthen the existing hybrid ecosystem. It was as if the alien intelligence was ensuring that its gifts would remain permanently integrated into Earth's biosphere. "They're not just leaving us with changes," Michael realized, watching the light show with understanding. "They're giving us the ability to continue the work on our own." The spores carried within them the complete genetic library of successful adaptations, along with the knowledge needed to guide future transformations. Dr. Maxwell's instruments confirmed what they were witnessing. "The alien enhancements have become self-sustaining," she announced, her voice filled with wonder. "The hybrid plants can now reproduce naturally, passing on their beneficial traits to future generations. We've achieved true integration." The news from other sites around the world was equally promising. The network of transformed ecosystems had begun to show measurable effects on global environmental health. Atmospheric carbon levels were dropping, dead zones in the oceans were recovering, and devastated habitats were showing signs of rapid restoration. But perhaps most remarkably, the changes had begun to influence human consciousness on a broader scale. Those who worked with the hybrid ecosystems found themselves developing a deeper connection to the natural world, even without direct transformation. It was as if the alien intelligence had provided humanity with tools not just for environmental restoration, but for spiritual and psychological growth as well. Michael's father's old journal, now filled with observations of this extraordinary year, had become a blueprint for future generations. Farmers worldwide were adopting the hybrid agriculture techniques developed on his land, creating a new kind of farming that worked in harmony with nature rather than against it. As the final light show faded, Michael felt a profound sense of completion. The meteorite's physical form was gone, but its legacy would continue through the transformed land and the knowledge it had shared. Buck, his fur shimmering with now stable bioluminescent patterns, seemed to share his contentment. "This isn't the end," Elena said, placing a hand on Michael's shoulder. "It's really just the beginning." She was right. The farm had become something far greater than a simple agricultural operation. It was now a living laboratory for humanity's potential future, a place where the boundaries between Earth and the cosmos had been gently dissolved. Looking out over his transformed land, Michael thought about his family's legacy. His great-grandfather had settled this farm seeking a better future. Now, 4 generations later, that dream had evolved into something far greater than anyone could have imagined. The Hayes family farm wasn't just providing food anymore. It was helping to nurture humanity's next great evolutionary step. The sun set over the crystalline fields, creating a symphony of light and color that still took Michael's breath away. The alien consciousness had given them the tools, shown them the way, and now trusted humanity to continue the journey. As he stood there with Buck, watching the next group of students and researchers arrive to learn from his experience, Michael knew that his family's land would continue to serve as a beacon of hope for generations to come. In the end, the story of a farmer finding a strange meteorite had become something far more. It had become a testament to humanity's potential to grow, adapt, and evolve in harmony with the cosmos. The transformation that had begun on this small Montana farm would continue to spread, offering hope for a future where humanity could truly become responsible caretakers of their world and worthy partners in the galactic community of life.